Everyone, and welcome back to Code the Web online lesson for JavaScript. And so, if you watched the last video, or if you have kept up in class, then we should be left off with this coding challenge, and hopefully you have solved that by your own, or maybe our teachers have helped you solve this during class. But we're gonna move on from this. So, first, I'm gonna talk about mathematical operations, and so. You can actually perform different mathematical operations in JavaScript. Plus is a plus, minus is still a minus. If you want to do multiplication, you can use the asterisk, which is Shift 8 on your keyboard. Division, use a slash, so that should be the key for a question mark, but you just don't press the Shift button. Double star, double asterisk is power, so 2 to the power of 3. That equal to 8. Now percent, what exactly is this thing? So that's basically the remainder. It gets the remainder, so 10% free. So you basically just do, let's just do some basic math here. Let's do 10 free, right? So 3 times 3 is 9. 1 will be left over. So this is the value that will be achieved. And so 10% free, that equals to 1. You should know the rule where you need to perform multiplication first, then addition or subtraction. So in math, you'd bypass this by adding brackets. You can do the same thing in JavaScript. Adding a bracket would perform the operations inside the bracket first, and then the stuff outside the bracket. Assignment. Well, normally in math, say I got 5. If I want to get 7, I do 5 plus 2, right? In programming, not just in JavaScript, in any programming language, you can't just do x plus 2, like when I declare the variable here. You need to set x equals to x plus 2. So you can think of this as x, I want to set x to the previous value of x, which is 5, plus 2. So for example, if I want to say I declare a variable, let x equals to 10. I want x to decrement by 5. I can do x equals x minus 5. And so basically I'm saying that I want to set x equal to whatever x was before, which is 10, minus 5. So that will result in 5. So we do console.log. You should see that there's a 5. Alright, continue. You can also increment and decrement. I mean, obviously you can just do x equals x plus 1, but JavaScript offers a very handy shortcut to that. You can just do x plus plus. That will turn x into 1 since it's 0. X minus minus would decrement x by 1. Concatenations. So you can concatenate strings or put strings together using the plus sign. For example, if I have first name here Steve, last name here Jobs, and I set name equal to first name plus an empty string plus last name, and I console.log that will result in Steve Jobs. So let's just try, let's try a similar thing here. So let's say const first string, that's my first string, I can set to A, maybe my second string will be B. Then I can add these two together. So I can do first string plus second string. So this will result in AB, since this is A and this is B. If we switch the order of this around, second string plus first string, this would result in BA. Next. Alright, here's a little, well, not exactly challenge, but a question. So I declared a variable called x and I set it to 10. Y also equal to 20. Then I declared another variable called z and I set them to x plus y. What do you think will be printed? Alright, I'll give you 3 seconds. If you can pause the video if you want. Alright, if you think it's 30, then you're absolutely wrong. It will print 1020. Well, so why is that? That's because 10 here, you declare that as a string. If you wrap double quotation marks around something, that will automatically turn it into a string. And as I said, if you do plus sign, if if you add two strings together using the plus sign, that will just concatenate them. The string doesn't care if it's a number or not. It won't perform the usual number operation. It would just add those two strings together. So that results in 1020. So JavaScript provides you a handy method called parseInt to convert a number string into a number. So for example here, I said x equals to 10. Keep in mind that this 10 is a string, not a number. I said y equals 20. If I do parseInt and then within the two brackets, I pass in what the thing I want to turn from a string into a number to. And so parseInt x, that will result in 10, which is a number. ParseInt y, that results in 20. Then 10 plus 20, that will result in 30. Alright, conditionals. So right now all of our code just runs in a linear fashion. It just runs from top to the bottom. But what if you only want to run some code when some statement is met? If only some condition is true. So we use conditional statements for this, and notably if statements. But here, the most basic form of a conditional, which is an if statement. And so the if statement takes in a Boolean value. So if you forgot from the previous video where I explained what data types are, a Boolean is basically a value that is either true or false. So it's either true or false. There's no other value. So if the Boolean is true, then all the code inside the if statement will run. But if the Boolean value is false, then it will not run. So here's how you declare an if statement. You can see I write the word if, then I put in two brackets. If you're coming from Python, just keep in mind that JavaScript is a bracket language, not like Python. And so within the brackets, you just put in your Boolean, and then afterwards you put in two curly braces, and within the two curly braces, you put whatever you want to run. Okay, now let's talk about equality. Using the equals operator, you can compare if two variables have the same value. So we use a triple equal sign instead of the single equal sign because the single equal sign is called the assignment operator, which assigns a variable to something. And so you should remember, say I do let x equals 5. I used equals here because I want to set something equal to another value. So in this case, I want to set x equal to 5. If we use the same thing in if statements, then that doesn't really make sense, right? Because you just want to check if they're equal, but you don't want to set a value equal to another. And so that's why you use the triple equal operator. The double equal operator also exists in JavaScript, but we don't really talk about that. And so if you're interested, you can search up yourself what's the difference between triple and double operator, but it's good practice to use a triple one. And so here, if 5 equals 5, then this would run, right? Because 5 does equal to 5. If hello equals to hello, also the same. Therefore, the blue bracket code here will run. If hello equals to lowercase hello, the thing is they're not equal because one is uppercase and the other is lowercase, and JavaScript is a case-sensitive language. Alright, what do you think will happen here? Will 5 equal to this 5? I will give you 3 seconds again. Well, they're not equal because 5 here is a number and 5 here is a string, and the number doesn't equal to a string. Alright, let's just try some of these if statements in code. Let's see, if 5 equals 5, then it'll run, right? Now let's do something different, like if h equals to d, then this will not run, right? Because h doesn't equal to d. Alright, I think you got the idea. So other than the comparison operator, you also got the comparison. Other than the equality operator, there's also other comparison operators. So here you can see there's something called smaller than. So that's just the usual ankle bracket. Smaller than or equal to. you put this angle bracket with an equal sign, and the bigger than or equal to. I think you got the idea. Here, else if. So what if you want to do something else? If the if statement in the first if the first if statement is false, then we can use something called the else if statement. So using this example, we can see that the first condition here is if 5 is bigger than 10. Is 5 bigger than 10? Well, I do not think 5 is bigger than 10. So when the first statement is not met, then it will go into the else if statement. And in the else if statement, the condition we put is if 5 bigger than 3. Well, 5 is bigger than 3, and therefore the code inside else if would run. And so let me just copy the code on my slide here real quick. Now the thing about else if statements is that even if this is true, this thing will not run unless this is false. So you can see that since this is false, then B will be printed. But let's say we make the first if statement true. If 5 is bigger than 0, then obviously 5 is bigger than 0. Then it will only run this. This will no longer be run. If we want to run both, if we want to run both if both conditions are true, then we can just get rid of the else and make them into two separate if statements. Then that means that they will be independent of each other. Alright. Okay, you can also chain multiple else if statements together. So the statements will be checked in order from top to bottom. So it will first check is 5 smaller than 10. If it isn't, then it checks is 4 smaller than 3. If this is false, then it will keep on checking until there's no more else if statements left. Now there's also something called else. So you always put else at the end of the if or the else if chain. And so else would run only if all of the stuff up here are false. So yeah, I think you got the idea. Okay, predict what will be printed in the console below. Okay, what do you think? Is 5 bigger than 10? Well, I believe not, so B would be printed. Alright, what about this one? I'll give you 3 seconds. You can pause the video if you need to think a bit longer. Alright, so hello does equal to hello, so A would be printed. Alright, let's take a look at this one. I'll give you 3 seconds again. Alright, if 10 equals to 10, well, that sounds correct, right? But the thing is, one is a number and the other is a string. Therefore, this is not correct. Since this is incorrect, it will move on to the else if condition. Now, is 5 equal to parse int 5? Well, if you remember from before, parse int turns a string into a number. And so 5 would equal to 5, and therefore B would be printed. Now, it doesn't move on to check if the third else if statement is correct because this is already true. It doesn't care about all the other stuff below anymore. So even if 5 is smaller or equal to 5, C will not be printed. Alright, logical negate operator. The negate operator, represented by an exclamation mark, turns a statement from false to true or from true to false. So here, I declared a boolean called my false boolean and I set it to false. Then if I do if and I put an exclamation mark and my false boolean, even though my false boolean is false, so logically it will not run it will not print out A. Because we put in the exclamation mark, which turns false into true, this statement becomes true, and therefore A would be printed. Sometimes for the logical negate operator to work, you need to use brackets. So here I did is 5 bigger than 10. Well, 5 is not bigger than 10, but then if I use brackets to wrap over the statement and I put an exclamation mark, then it will turn 5 bigger than 10 into it will turn it from false to true, and therefore this would run. Say if I do if 10 is bigger than 5, sorry. Well, this would run, right? Since this is true. But if you add a logical negate operator, then this turns this true statement into false, and therefore this will not run anymore. So you can see that nothing is printed in the console. There's also the not equal operator, which is exclamation mark equal equal. So that will check if two variables do not equal to each other. There's also the AND operator, which checks if two conditions are true at the same time. If 5 bigger is 2 and 10 is bigger or equal to 10. Well, both of these conditions are true, right? And so this would run. The AND operator is not limited to 2 statements. You can just keep using this. The thing to look out for in the AND operator is that both statements need to be correct. So here, even though 5 is bigger than 2, because 10 is not bigger than 20, this would not run anymore. This would not run this part. And so you can see nothing is printed in the console either. There's also the OR operator, so it just checks if either of the condition is true. And so if 5 is smaller than 2, or if 10 is bigger than 5, even though 5 is smaller than 2, because 10 is bigger than 5, then it doesn't matter. None of these here matter. It will just print out A. If I got like a ton of 10's bigger than 20, or if 5 is bigger than 10, or if 10 is bigger than 40, or is 1 bigger than 0. Even though all of these statements are false, because we got this one is true, then this whole thing would be true. And A would be run. A would be executed. See, you can see A here. So that's kind of the power of our OR statements. Alright, yeah, you can chain them together. You can also actually use OR operators and AND operators together. Alright, a little challenge. What do you think? Will the following if statement be true? Will this get printed? Is the question. I'll give you 10 seconds for this one, but you can always pause the video, as I said. Alright, well, let's get printed. Well, let's see. Oh, the answer is no, it will not it will not print. Now let's just run this over very quickly. If A equals to A, that is true. Or if 5 is bigger than 10. Even though 5 is not bigger than 10, because A equals to A is true, then this whole thing will be true. But then we put an exclamation mark, that will turn a true into false, right? And so therefore, the first part here, if you can look at my cursor, this part will be false. Now there's still hope because we used an OR operator. So if this part is true, then this will get printed. If 20 is bigger than 10, that is true. And we use the AND operator, so we still need to check if this is true. If H doesn't equal to H, well, that's not true, right? H does equal to H. Therefore, this part will be false. Since this part is false, and this part is also false, then this will not get printed, unfortunately. Now let's talk about arrays. So before I introduced the 3 basic data types, right? Numbers, strings, booleans, very easy, right? Well, arrays are a more advanced data type. So you can treat them as a list. They can hold different data of different types. Well, but usually you only hold one type of data. Like here, const names, it is a list of strings. So how do I declare an array? An array always starts with a square bracket, an open square bracket, and it ends with a closing square bracket. Within the square brackets, you put your list, what data you wanna hold. So each item in the array is separated with a comma here. So let's just try declaring this array here, this array of names, const names equals, and you do the square bracket. Code Sandbox will automatically help you finish the closing one, and within here you just put your items. So I can put John, Paul, George, and Ringo. In case you haven't noticed, these are the Beatles. Let's create an array of numbers now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is, you can declare arrays effortlessly, basically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 here. Each item is separated with a comma. Alright, so now I have an array, right? But how do I access each individual item in an array? Well, you need to first understand something called index. And so each item in the array is actually assigned a number. So called the index. To reference or to access an item in the array, you will need to use this number. So these numbers start from 0 instead of 1, and this is very, very important. The first item in an array is always 0, not 1. Just keep repeating this to yourself. The first item in the array is always 0. This would be very useful, and it will prevent you from doing any really stupid errors or mistakes when you're coding. And so this pretty much applies to almost any other programming language. Almost any other programming language, the first item in the array is 0. So this would serve very useful when even when you're not doing JavaScript, when you're doing like Java or Python or PHP. All right. So now when you got the number, in order to access the element or the item you want to get, you first use the name of the array. So the name of the array is names, right? After names, I put in a square bracket, and within the square bracket, I put in the number with the index. So since I put in 0, as I said, 0 is the first item, then it will get John, since John is the first item in the array. So if I do const.log numbers 0, which number do you think will be printed? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7? Alright, it'll be 1, because 1 is the first item in our array. Now let's do 4. That'll print out 5, because our fifth item actually, because remember, they start from 0, and so the first item would be 0, 1 would be 0, 2 would be 1, 3 would be, I messed up, sorry. 1 would be 0, 2 would be 1, 3 would be 2, 4 would be 3, and 5 would have an index of 4. So that may be a bit confusing, so I'm just going to use names array. So let's see. Names 2. Okay, which name do you think will be printed? Is it John, is it Paul, is it George, or is it Ringo? Well, since John has an index of 0, Paul has an index of 1, naturally George would be printed. Here, George. Alright. Yeah, we've already done that. Methods. Alright, so sometimes you want to write oh wait, sorry, this is not relevant. Alright. So you can get how long an array is using the length method. So for example, if I do names.length, that'll return 4. That's because there are 4 items in our array. So yeah, pretty self-explanatory. To add an item at the end of an array during runtime, so it's not permanent, you can use the push method. So here you can see I still got the Beatles here. Then if I do names.push, and then I pass in an item, so in this case Martin, then I const.log the array, you can see Martin, since we pushed it into this array. And you will notice that it will be at the end of this array, since a push adds an item to the end of the array, not like any random position. Loops allow you to run the same piece of code multiple times. There are two types of loops. The first one is a while loop, the second one is a for loop. So I'll talk about the while loops first. So a while loop runs code when a specific condition is true. For example, here, I did let I equals 0. While I is smaller than 4, then I want to print out what the value of I, then I want to increment I by 1. So you can see that it prints out 0, 1, 2, 3. So in the first loop, 0 is smaller than 4, and therefore this whole thing would run. We incremented this by 1, so this would become 1 is if we, now for the second iteration we are checking if 1 is smaller than 4. That is still true. Then it keeps going on. Is 2 smaller than 4? That is true. Is 3 smaller than 4? That is still true. Is 4 smaller than 4? Well, that's no longer true, is it? Therefore, this whole thing will not run anymore, and the loop is terminated. Alright, this is a very fun coding challenge. So, it's quite infamous, or maybe not infamous, famous in the coding world. So, coders call this challenge FizzBuzz. And so it's actually an interview question. It's actually an Amazon interview question, and it's a good way for interviewees to check if the person applying is actually qualified for their job. And because the thing is, it's actually not a very hard challenge. So what I want you to do is that starting from 1 and ending at 100, if the number is divisible by 3, in case you don't know what divisible means, it just means that when that number is divided by 3, the remainder will be 0. So when that happens, I want to print out fizz. If the number is divisible by 5, I want to print out buzz. If the number is divisible by both 3 and 5, print out fizz buzz. So for example, 15. 15 is both divisible by 3 and 5, and so therefore when we get to 15, I want to print out fizz buzz. So if all of these are false, I just want to print out the number. So let's say like 2. 2 is not divisible by 3, it's not divisible by 5, therefore I'm going to print out 2. Alright, so just spin up your code a sandbox right now and attempt this challenge. Please pause this video. I'm sure this will take some time. So alright, I'm going to continue and show you the solution. If you cannot attempt this, or you haven't attempted it yet, please pause the video. Last warning. There you go. Here's the solution. So there's actually a lot of different ways to solve this, and so if yours do not look like this but it still works, then it's still fine, completely fine. So here, I made a variable called I, which will be incremented, and I said while I is smaller than 100. While I is smaller than 100, I want to keep this thing running again and again and again and again until I is bigger than 100. So here I use the percent operator because I want to check if the remainder equals 0. So I said if I percent 3 equals 0, if I percent 5 equals 0, that means that the number is divisible by both 3 and 5. Then I want to constant log fizzbuzz. Else if, notice I use else if because I only want this thing to run if the first statement is false. So I did else if I percent 3 equals 0. That means that it's only divisible by 3. Then I print out fizz. Then I do the same thing for the 5, which will print out buzz. Else, that is when all of these statements do not match. So that is when the number is neither divisible by 5 or 3. So I just want to print out the number. At the end of these if statements, I did I equals I plus 1. So it's very important that you change the variable that you're looping, or else it will just keep running forever, infinitely, and your computer is going to crash. Basically, that's what's going to happen. So you need to be very careful using while loops because you probably do not want your computer to crash. Alright, let's talk about for loops. So a for loop is very similar to a while loop. So a for loop has 3 components. First of all, here, you declare a variable, often called I, and you set its starting condition. So this is basically a starting condition where I want the loop to start. Like I want the loop to start 0, I want it to start at -5. Then the second thing here, after the semicolon, you need to be careful about the semicolon. After the semicolon, you place the condition here. So what I'm saying here is if I is smaller than 25, then I want to keep running this. after the semicolon again, I put this thing, which is how the variable is changed after each loop. So here I'm saying that I just want I to increment after each loop. So this would run for 24 times. Well, actually 25, I believe, from 0 to 24. During 25, this statement will not run anymore, and so this condition will not be true anymore, and so the for loop will not run. So let's just see here. So you can see that I made the do you remember the while loop example? Let me see here. So I made the while loop using a for loop, so you can see that they're easily interchangeable. And so which one you use is up to you, but obviously there are some cases where while loops are better than for loops and vice versa, and you will probably know when is the right time to use which. Alright, here. Okay, let's do another coding challenge. I want you to print out all the elements in any given array. So say I got this array. I want you to print out all of the elements here using a for loop. And so I want any array. Like, I don't want just this array. I want maybe an array that has like 8 items. Like, I want it to be flexible. So how would I do this? Just make an example array and test it out. So yeah. So spin up code sandbox again and attempt the challenge yourself. Alright, I'm going to move on to the solution now, but here it is. So say I create an array here, and I did for let I equal to 0. 0 is our starting condition because, as I said, the first element in an array is 0. Then the condition is that if I is smaller than the length of the array, I want to keep looping if I is smaller than the array's length so that I can get to the last element here. Then in each loop I just want to increment I by 1. Then as const.log my array, and I use a square bracket syntax and I pass in I. Remember that I holds a number, and so that will dynamically change. That will dynamically print out all of these elements here. Objects. So they are object is a data type with a property and a type. So we can think of this as a cup or any real object in the real world. So a cup has a color, a weight, a design, and a material, and so on. So in the same way, an object also has these properties, and each of these properties may have their own values. For example, color this is orange. Weight, this might be around 200 grams, I guess. Design has a handle, I guess. Material made of ceramic, probably, or maybe glass. So let's try to write this in code. So using coding terminology, an object is composed of key value pairs. Well, this is not something you memorize, but it's just how programmers used to describe objects. So it's very similar to an array, but instead you use properties to access an element instead of an array. Here, I did const animal equals, and then to declare an object, you used curly braces. Within the curly braces, I put in the property, and then a colon, and then the value. So I'm gonna explain more in the later slides. So you can think of key value pairs as a key and door. You can use a certain key to open the door that key is bounded to, and you can get whatever data is inside that door. Alright, so how about let's declare an object. So const maybe a movie. Okay, that'll work. Movie equals, and then to declare an object, you use the curly braces. Then well, a movie has a name, right? And so we can type out the property name and use colon. So the property or the name of this movie, I want it to be Silence of the Lambs, let's say. Alright, so this is an example. Maybe you can have a release here when it's released. 1991. What else? Well, we can have an array of actors. So you can have an array inside an object. So let's put that in. Well, a movie may also have, an object can also contain an object. So, and you can just keep putting different stuff inside here. So for an object, I guess you can put extra details about this movie, and then we can set this equal to an object. And maybe inside here, we can put in, I don't know, maybe all the Oscars number, how many Oscars the movie got, which is 5. And then you can actually embed more objects inside. I'm just gonna create something random. You can do something like this. Like you can just create, like an object can be very complex. That's what I'm saying. Alright, so to access object data, so there's two ways to access object data. The first one is called the dot notation. So you basically just use the variable name of that object and you put a dot. After that, you put the property name. So, for example, here I do movie dot, and then let's say I want a list of actors. I want all the actors in this movie. I just put actors. And since I set actors equal to an array containing Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins, now I'll print out the array containing that. As you see here. Let's try printing out, maybe we can print out the Oscars number. So we do that by doing dot extra details. And then since this is an array, to access this, you can continue using the dot thing. So you can see this will print out 5 since we set Oscars number equals to 5. Save this. Yeah, 5. Alright, the second notation is called the bracket notation, which is less common than the dot notation, but it has its usages. You basically use the square bracket thing and you pass in what the property is. This one's not as important, so I don't really think you need to know this. Alright, you can update object data by doing that thing dot, like the variable name dot property, and you set equal to something. For example, I'm just gonna do maybe movie dot release year. I'm gonna change the release year to 1992, and then let's just console.log the whole movie again. So since I set it to 1992, you can see that the release year now becomes 1992. You can also add object data, and so that's the exact same thing. You basically just do movie dot and then the property you want to add. So maybe I want to add the original screenplay offer, or I actually forgot who it's by, so let's just do movie dot rating, and let's set to R. Since then, if we do, you can see that there's a new property called rating, and it's equal to R because I said movie dot rating equals to R. You can also delete object data. So say I don't want I don't want the actors anymore. I can do delete and movie dot actors. So this would remove the property actors from this object. So you can see only the name, release year, and the extra details remain. Alright, functions. So this should be the last concept we're going to cover. So function allows you to create reusable logic. So sometimes you might find yourself writing stuff over and over again, or maybe your code is just getting way too messy. So you need some way to organize it. Well, functions are the perfect way to do it. For example, let's say I have this little utility. There's this little function I want in my app to convert from Fahrenheit to Celsius. Well, I mean, I can just write the formula every time, but that's just a bit annoying, right? Well, I can declare a function called to Celsius, which takes in the Fahrenheit. Then then I can just write the logic inside this function. Then every time I call it to Celsius and I pass in the value, it would just run it. It would just run the thing, and then I don't have to keep on writing the logic over and over again. Alright, let me tell you what the syntax is. First, you type function. So the function keyword tells the browser that you are declaring a function. Then you have the message name, the function name. So in this case, I called it print message. So that's the name of my function. Then you put in 2 square brackets, and after not square brackets, you put in 2 brackets. After brackets, you put braces. Inside of braces, you put whatever you want to run in the function. So I'm gonna function message. Print message. Now I can call this function by doing print. I just need to get the function name and then braces brackets. Don't forget the brackets. If you don't put the brackets, it won't call the function. Then you do this. Now it'll print out ddd. Now, as I said, the amazing thing about functions is that you can reuse the logic. And so if I print this multiple times, since I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, it'll print this 7 times. It's 8 because I printed it once before I did this. So this is great because, you know, I mean, this seems like a very simple function, right? Like, I don't need to reuse this, right? But if our things get more complicated, like I want to also print EEE, then if I want to do this 7 times, now I'll have to do this. I have to print this 7 times, and that's kind of annoying, right? But now I can just call the print message function, and it'll handle all of that for me. Here. All right. So if you've learned functions in math, you know that a function in math would have an input like fx, and it would also have an output. Like if fx, that's horrible, x equals to, I don't know, x plus 2, then we pass in 5, we set x equals to 5, and now return 7, since 5 plus 2 is 7. So functions in JavaScript also have inputs and outputs. So for inputs, they're called parameters. So they're declared within the brackets of the function. So like here, I declared a parameter called x. Then whenever I want to call this function, I need to pass in a value for that. So for example here, I made this function called something, has a parameter x. Then I console.log x. Then when I do something 5, that'll print out 5. So maybe we can modify this a little. Let's make something called message here. I'm gonna do message. Now I can just use this function, but I need to pass in this here. So maybe the message is JavaScript is awesome. You can see this will be printed now. Now I can reuse the same logic. I can do something like web development is fun. You can see that this will be printed. So you can have multiple variables. You can have multiple parameters. So they're separated by a comma, basically. So maybe I can have message, and I also want second message, message 2, and I can just do that. So since I declared a parameter here called message 2, I need to do the same thing here. So again, separated by a comma. Alright, first challenge. Make a function called findIndex that takes in an array and a target. In the function, if the target is found inside the array, log the index of the target in the console. So here, I already wrote some of the boilerplate for you, but basically, the findIndex would have the first parameter array, so that would contain the array, and target. And so, in here, I want you to, I don't know, loop through the array and check for each target, and then return the index basically. So here, I declared an array again with the Beatles. I want to find George. So since George is the third item, they will have an index of 2, because as I said, arrays always start with 0. And so if the function would basically return 2. Alright, so spin up code sandbox again and just try to do the challenge yourself. I'm gonna switch to a solution right now. So here, this is a very easy one. So find index, and then array target for let. I just want to loop through the array, and I want to check if the array item equals to the target. If it does, then I just const.log it basically. Alright, I don't know why it's just function challenge free, probably because I'm bad at math. It should be 2. But I want to make a function that called checkName that takes in the string username. If the username that is put in is not the same as your name, so you can use the if statement, then you return this is not your computer. Username, this is not your computer. So this would be dynamic. If the input name is same as your name, return hi username. So username would be the thing you put in. So it's not just gonna be username. So if I put in my username, say it's like fungi, then they would put in fungi. Like it'll return hi fungi. Alright, so I actually have to mention one more thing. And so other than parameters, which are input, there's also outputs, right? So outputs are determined by this function keyword. So maybe I can do print a function sum now, and then the sum function would take in 2 parameters, one called x, one called y. Then maybe I can add them together. So const z equals x plus y, because that's what the sum is, right? Then in order to create an output, you use the return keyword. After return, you put in whatever you want to return, whatever you want to output. So in this case, I want to output z. So now this function will have an output. So I can reference this output anywhere. I can just do const.log sum, and I pass in 5 and 12. That'll print out 17, because 5 plus 12 is 17. So yeah, I just want to use the return logic to do something similar. And so I'll just help you create the boilerplate for this. So I want to do something like this. Wait, no, sorry. And then maybe bogus. Oh, and actually const.log, because I want the value to be returned, so it's not just a simple const.log call. All right. Okay. I'll give you some time to figure it out. So pause the video if you need to. All right. Here's the solution. If name equals to Alvin, if Alvin is my name, then I return hi plus name. Then else I return name. This is not your computer. Then if I console.log check name Alvin, then it would say hi Alvin. If I console.log check name Harold, since Harold does not use Alvin, it will print this part. Then it will say Harold, this is not your computer. Alright, so this is basically JavaScript. So obviously these are just the beginner stuff. So, but this is all the JavaScript we're going to cover in this course. If you're interested, there are a lot of tutorials online that go a lot deeper into this video. So I definitely recommend you to do so, because not only would that enhance your knowledge, it can also greatly benefit you when you're attempting our final challenge of the course, which is creating the game. Because if you know more JavaScript, then obviously you would be a better programmer, right? Alright, so pretty good. So this is the end of the video. Just make sure you go back home and practice. And there's actually a quite neat website that gives you some questions to attempt. It's called LeetCode. So search up LeetCode problems online and go to here problems. So you can see that there's actually a lot of problems here for you to solve. And so, for example, here two-sum. You can filter it by difficulty. So you can attempt this. This is the description, and here you can select JavaScript. Yeah, I already selected that. So yeah, alright. Thanks guys, bye bye.